Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. We are once again live with another episode of Meet the HR. This is episode 5, and today we have with us Ms. Chitralekha Singh, who is the global talent management lead at Standard Chartered Bank, and she is joining us all the way from Singapore. So it's a great honor to have her with us on this platform and sharing all her knowledge and her experience. So let's have you, ma'am. Could you please? Hello, ma'am.
Hi, Rashab. I'm switching on my audio. Hi. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me. Yes, it's been a good Sunday and a good end to the weekend. It's kind of pretty late my time, but yeah, always up for chats like this.
Great, ma'am. First of all, it's wonderful that technology is helping us and enabling this conversation in the first place. You're joining us all the way from Singapore, and really appreciate the fact that you've taken out the time to join us on this live session. So, just to get started, ma'am, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about your background?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I'm currently in the sort of the global talent team at Standard Chartered Bank. I have been with the bank for close to 5 years in various roles in HR across teams, across sort of countries. I've also had a sort of a short stint in one of the businesses that I was supporting, and prior to Standard Chartered Bank, I was with Mercer Consulting, where I spent again, I was in talent sort of consulting, talent and M&A consulting vertical of Mercer Consulting. And I spent again around 2.5 years. And before that, I was with Reliance Industries, again in their global talent management team um, for a couple of years. And yeah, I think prior to that, I did my MBA from XLRI Jamshedpur, MBA in HR. And before that, I was actually a software engineer working with TCS in Bangalore. And yeah, an engineer, an engineer in IT from VIT Vellore. But yeah, it's been, that's kind of my journey. Personally, I'm married. I have a 1-year-old child, and my family are sort of based in India, most of them. So yeah, that's pretty much about me.
Right, ma'am. Like you just mentioned, it's been a wonderful journey spanning almost over 10 years. So I wanted to understand from you, like you just mentioned that you've been a software engineer in the past. So what led to this inclination towards the field of HR for you personally?
Yeah, sure. So I think when I was sort of, I did my engineering in IT, and then I joined a software, company doing what I kind of learned for the 4 years, right? Studying, doing what I studied for. But I think when I was doing the job of a software engineer, I think after a point, I started to feel that it did not really do justice to all of my skill sets. I did feel that there are areas of my sort of personality. There are some skill sets that I have that I can sort of use to contribute in a broader way to organizations. I think that was one. I think the second thing was around um, just the work that I was doing. After a bit, it started to feel like it's a little bit narrow, so it's just sort of the technical aspect. It's just sort of very having a very narrow focus of just delivering on a project and coding and all of that, right? And that's when I started to introspect about what is it that I want to do in future. Do I want to continue in this tech field? Do I want to move out? And and it was not so much, it didn't start with the fact that I want to do HR, but it started kind of more with wanting to do an MBA, wanting to learn about businesses more broadly, wanting to sort of understand how business gets done, how organizations run, and things like that. And then when I started to mull over, okay, within MBA, what is it that makes sense for me personally? And I thought about just three streams, broadly, which is like finance, marketing, and HR. And at that point, with whatever limited knowledge, understanding I could get from conversations with people, etc., I zeroed in into kind of HR, because I felt that there is a lot of like I generally found the field interesting. I felt there's a lot of contribution that I can make. And personally, I felt I connected to, like I could see some of my skill sets being used in the field of HR, not so much, in sales and marketing or in kind of finance. So, finance. So I think it was more about where I see a fit and trying to see what might be, but with an understanding that often whatever decisions you make, you often kind of make it with the limited data points or limited knowledge you may have at that point in time. So I kind of fully knew, and I can kind of was open to being flexible. So I think, yeah, that was my approach. And obviously, when I got through B school, which is known for HR, I think that was another reason which kind of said, okay, now I'm sure I really want to do it in this B school. So it was more like a brand as well, which I knew will be a good sort of stamp of approval, or in the field of HR, it'll sort of help me. So that was the other thing. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, that's my story.
Right. Very interesting, ma'am. And what about your current experience at Standard Chartered as the Global Talent Management Lead? How has that been for you, in your experience? And how has that been for you personally? How have you enjoyed working in this role?
So to be very honest, like I have a fair amount of experience in the talent management domain, and talent management, when I say that, it's quite broad. So there are kind of various areas even within talent management that are required to be done in organizations, and large organizations sort of do classify it into further sort of specialities like talent development, and talent reviews, talent. There's one piece around recruitment, which is not my sort of area, but I'm more in the space of succession planning, talent reviews, kind of things, right? Um, so talent had been an area of interest from the very beginning, from the time I was in the B school, actually. There was something about leadership development and talent development that kind of attracted me, excited me. And then there was something around kind of helping people achieve their fullest potential that kind of spoke to my own purpose. So probably, because of some of these reasons, I kind of continue to seek out opportunities in talent. And it happened in Reliance, it happened in Mercer. And then when I came to Standard Chartered, I actually joined as an HR business partner. And after having done that for a couple of years, I started feeling a strong pull towards doing like something which is more specialized and more sort of global in that sense, because my HR business partner role was for a country, which was for India. But I wanted to do something which is sort of more specialized but more global as well, which has scope across the organization. So my current role actually at Standard Chartered Bank is about managing a couple of talent management areas, right? So one is leading on the succession planning piece. So it's really, thinking about what are the roles that need to be succession planned for within the organization. How do you sort of define a framework around that? What are the responsibilities of line managers? We call them people leaders in succession planning. What are the do's and don'ts, and that kind of thing, right? The other piece that I kind of lead on is around talent identification. So how do you identify who are your best talent? Who do you want to invest in? How do you identify the unique sort of um, strengths and development areas of every individual? So you're able to give them the opportunities that meets their aspirations and also helps them be their best. So that's sort of the other bucket. And the third thing that I've been leading on is around talent reviews. How do you kind of have how do you kind of review your whole population of talent in your business, right? You have like thousands of people, but how do you kind of enable structure or enable sort of a framework which guides line managers or people leaders to be able to review their, say, top talent or diverse talent or whatever, whatever it is that their priority is. So that's been my role. I've really enjoyed it. It was a huge area of interest. It was an aspiration for me, which got met actually when I got this role. So yeah, I think it's been good, great learning, and I really enjoyed it.
Right.
Sorry.
That's great to know, ma'am, a little bit about your experience. And could you just tell me how that move to Singapore happened? Because prior to that, you were working in India. So how did that move to Singapore happen?
Yeah.
And what difference have you seen between what has been between Singapore and India in terms of your job role?
Yeah, so I think in most of the global MNCs, you do have internal job opportunities. You do have kind of any job that, at least like that's my experience been in Standard Chartered, right? Any job that gets posted externally, before that, it actually gets posted internally for internal talent to get the opportunity. So, so this was one of the internal job postings, and I applied for it. And so, excuse me. Yeah. So this was one of the internal job postings. I applied for it, and there was this whole interview process, and sort of I cleared that, and it was as simple as that. And you will see a lot of these kind of movements happening in most of the global MNCs, right? You kind of prove yourself. You've done your role for a certain period of time, and then you get through the process of, there's an internal proper recruitment or sort of interview process that happens for internal movements, and that's it. I mean, you can land opportunities. Yeah, that's how it happened for me. And in terms of how it's different, I think there are a few nuances to this role, and I don't know if it's so much to do with Singapore as a place, but it's more to do with the role that I was performing. So I think I mentioned before as well, right? My previous role was HR business partner for a country, and so I was responsible for a couple of businesses pan India, which is wealth management, private banking. But when I moved to this global role, right? I had to kind of think more broadly, think about uh, any sort of process, product, or policy that I'm thinking of. How will it land in 70 different nationalities, right? So 70 different countries, sorry. Uh, like you know that there is a certain culture in, and there is an organizational culture, of course. So there is a culture which is kind of common across the bank, but there are kind of nuances to that with respect to every country, every region, and things like that, right? So kind of there's a local flavor, and then there's this global flavor. And so for me, because this role is global, it was about starting to think more globally, more sort of broadly, and also thinking about uh, like end to end, how sort of the work in HR gets delivered, just by nature of the role, right? Because the role itself is quite different. So that's sort of the key difference for me. And the other bit is, of course, around the work environment, which is very multicultural in a country like Singapore. So that broadens your horizons, right? You have been working in a country with similar kind of people, with similar kind of backgrounds, perhaps, and who are not very different from you. But then when you kind of move to a place like Singapore, where you have people from various different nationalities, you start to become more aware about, or you start to even become more sensitive about how, how should you sort of behave in a certain setting, or how you should be respectful or inclusive in your conversations and things like that. And even in terms of I think thoughts and ideas that people kind of bring in, a more diverse group will always bring in more diverse and different types of ideas and thoughts and solutions, right? Which a homogeneous group will not bring. So that's the other piece. The richness of the discussion sometimes is, I feel, is probably higher because people are coming from different contexts and backgrounds and countries. So that's been the other sort of experience, and I find that quite enriching personally for me. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great to know, ma'am. And what about, let's say, if someone were to apply at Standard Chartered Bank for a particular role, how would you suggest them to go about preparing for that role, be it tech or any other position for that matter? What is your one piece of advice that you usually share with someone who has to apply for a role at Standard Chartered Bank?
So I think, and probably not just for Standard Chartered, but for kind of for any organization, right? I think it's important when you apply to a role, it's important to think about it in terms of skill sets and capabilities, right? So often we get caught up, at least I used to, and it's been a learning for me over the past decade or so. I used to be in the beginning think more about, oh, these are my qualifications, these are things I know, and these are the kind of experiences I've had. So I have like X number of years of experience in XYZ organization, or I have done X degree from Y kind of college and things like that, right? I think that thinking may not always be helpful. I think it's helpful to think in terms of skill sets. It's helpful to think in terms of capabilities, right? So thinking about, okay, for this job, what are the kind of the right skills and capabilities? Do I have them or not? And what's that kind of match? And then sort of applying. So I think that applies to any organization, I would say, and Standard Chartered is no different. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And with respect to HR, right, what are some of the key trends today, if I were to ask you, in 2021? What is something that is really bound to become big in the future, or is something that is really doing well in the present at the
Um, so the whole, I think couple of things come to my mind, right? The whole sort of the world of work has changed because of this pandemic.
moment?
The way we do work is completely different and unheard of, right? And a lot of these changes actually impacted HR.
Yeah, right.
So things like remote working, for example, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's something which all organizations are now thinking about. What is
yes,
their stance on remote working? Do they allow remote working for everyone in a country like India, for example? If they allow remote working, do they are they okay for someone to work and if someone decides to work 100% of the time remotely, then are they okay to let that person work from anywhere? Like, can the person work from a different city? What does that mean from a compensation perspective for that person? So,
right.
there are organizations who are thinking about, okay, if someone is doing the same job sitting from a tier 2 city, then does it have an impact on their compensation or not? Like, so there are a lot of these questions which are coming up, right? So I think that's clearly like one piece where each organization is thinking. They're trying to form their own opinion. They're trying to form their point of view to say, okay, what is our stance, right? And what do we want to do? And you will have seen various organizations coming up with their own statements to say, we want hybrid working. We are okay with 100% remote, and they'll be
Yeah,
very. I mean, if you kind of read, right, you'll see interesting trends between, say, financial institutions versus tech giants
yeah,
versus, so you'll see some of these things coming, right? Because there are also practical realities. um, an organization which has a plant where you need workers to come and kind of work on the shop floor, they cannot have, so they cannot have remote working. So what does it mean for that organization as a culture? So I think this is kind of one trend which is definitely uh, everywhere. And I see you nodding, so I'm sure you've also kind of read enough about some of this, right? Because it's kind of so um, it's so pervasive. But I think the other one, which is also, at least I'm hearing a lot about it, and I'm seeing it. I'm seeing various organizations kind of talk about it a lot more. Is the thing around well-being. So what's actually happened is that
yes,
in the pandemic, like, people have been stuck in their rooms working 24/7. There are no boundaries between work and life. That commute which you used to have to office was like a, it would demarcate the end of your work day and beginning of your personal life. But now all the boundaries have blurred, and no one sort of has any semblance of home office. uh, People are working late nights, people are
yeah.
working weekends, you have nothing else to do, so work has become this all
There's
encompassing thing.
There's no
Yeah, I'm
boundary
sure.
between your personal and professional life.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's taking a toll on people. People are beginning to get fatigued, right? So
Yeah.
it's been a year and a half since this pandemic, and therefore now organizations are having to proactively think about well-being, proactively think about the mental health of their colleagues. The other reason to also kind of do that is that a lot of people have experienced personal loss. People have experienced tragedy in their kind of lives, and that's also kind of started to take toll on their mental health. So I think a few of these things coupled together, and obviously an impact of the pandemic has uh, brought the well-being piece to the forefront. So all organizations are trying
Yeah.
to think about what can we do to improve the well-being of our colleagues, because I think there is increasingly more and more realization that people bring their whole selves to work. It's not just a different self to work, which is just which does work, and another self which does your which is your personal life, right? It's kind of everything together. So
Yeah.
if one part of your life is affected, the other part is bound to get affected, right? So and so I think organizations are trying to provide support, and trying to think of how can they sort of improve that. So I think that's clearly I think the second trend. And I think the third one is, um, and this is again more as in of whatever I've kind of read in the recent past. It's more kind of younger generations, millennials specifically, who are now looking for more and more meaning in work, and they are more and more sort of conscious about what are their organizations, you know, like what are their organizations kind of stands about, say sustainability, for example, and they're more and more conscious about what kind of organization they want to work with, and whether or not the work gives them meaning in their lives. That's one. And second, whether they connect to the kind of the ethical, if I don't know if that's the right word, but if they agree with some of those aspects of the or the values. I think values is the right word, right? So if they agree with the values of the organization. So I think that to me will be the third one. So now organizations are having to think about, okay, it's not just a monetary contract, but it's about uh, what are our values, and what is the purpose that we have as an organization, and does that purpose connect to the purpose of individuals, and how do we sort of ensure that there's a match between the two, which helps them to attract the right kind of talent. So yeah,
Right.
these I think will be the top three for me.
Right. And ma'am, interestingly, you just mentioned about well-being being one of the key pillars of any organization, and now how it's become all the more important when it comes to the pandemic. And in fact, it is the title of part of the title of our live session today, of course. But apart from that, there is also this aspect of diversity. So could you tell us what diversity is all about in terms of HR? Like we were talking prior to the show about how hiring across different leadership roles, especially in terms of race and ethnicity. So could you talk us through a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think diversity is something which has been kind of spoken about, and it's been on organizations' radar for a long time. But and so I don't think it's kind of any new trend or anything. But yeah, I think there is an increasing awareness in organizations to on or there's an increasing awareness or understanding in organizations about the why of diversity, right? So how, like I think I was mentioning earlier, right? For example, a global team where you have people from various different backgrounds will have, if they are having a discussion, that'll be a richer discussion. And so therefore, if the teams that are diverse, there is enough and more research to kind of prove the teams that are diverse are actually, they make more business sense, because they are actually better in terms of performance. They are they are better in terms of the outcomes that they achieve, right? So I think organizations are becoming more and more aware about the why of it, and I think they're really sort
Yeah.
of uh, really trying to ensure how they kind of become a place that is able to attract talent from across, um, across various, like, so basically diversity can mean different things to different kind of organizations, right? So for a global MNC, it will mean across, across roles having sort of uh, ethnic diversity, gender diversity, LGBTQ kind of diversity. So kind of everything, right? So how do you make sure that people are able to bring their whole selves to work, and they feel included in being able to be themselves in the organization? So I think that's the attempt, and the outcome is obviously because it makes sort of business sense. Um, so yeah, I think those are my sort of couple of thoughts on that.
Right, man. Really interesting. And coming back to you personally now, and talking a little bit about background specifically, you were someone who, like you mentioned earlier, that you were a software engineer and eventually got into HR because you realized after a point of time what you wanted to do. But there are those some individuals who kind of, at a later stage in their life realize that this is what I actually want to do. Maybe someone who's from a completely different domain, like marketing or finance or any other field for that matter, or even tech, but realize that, HR is my true calling. So according to you, do you really feel that it is necessary to have a technical background or, some knowledge of HR to get into this field?
Uh, I would say yes and no. I mean, so if kind of people have worked in organizations for long enough, right? I think they will have experienced HR at different, points in time. So there are some kind of areas in HR which are not very very specialized, which do not need very niche specialist skill sets, right? And so those, if you've been in an organization and if you can probably if you've kind of experienced some of that, you can still move into that and you can learn. I think it's not like rocket science, but there are um, some areas in HR, for example, compensation and benefits, I would say, one which are very, very specialized, or employee relations, which are very, very specialized, which kind of require a particular kind of kind of degree or studies, and all of that. So if getting into some of those may be a little bit more difficult, I'm not saying it cannot happen. You can still, obviously, you can still learn and kind of move, and there are various courses which are available at the moment which people can do, but then you
Yeah.
probably may need to start at a kind of more junior level kind of things, right? But laterally, if you were to still kind of want to move to other to HR, then I think there are various other fields within HR where people could move, and I do see that happening actually quite often in organizations. People move from sales to HR, or HR to some other kind of maybe compliance, or
Yeah.
different fields. So I think that to and fro often happens.
Right, absolutely. And I really hope that the people who are watching this have taken note of what ma'am has said, because it's really important, and especially for aspiring professionals as well as those who want to switch their field after some point of time in their careers. Right, ma'am. With you specifically, I just wanted to know, because right now the world is going through a very dark phase at the moment, which is of course due to the pandemic. So I just wanted to know if that has affected your life in any way, or the HR industry in general, because of course a lot of places hiring was frozen for quite some time, but now slowly things are opening up. So what is your view on this?
So I think, as in impacted me personally, I think obviously everyone's impacted in some form or the other, right? I mean, parenting at home is tough, right? You have to manage a child, you have to manage kind of your work, and so some of that, it's kind of harder balancing act. It's anyway a balancing act, kind of managing a child and work, but in pandemic it kind of becomes that much harder. I think that's been there. I think as an organization, I mean, like any other organization, right? I think the things like hiring freezes and stuff, um, that's happened business to business. I wouldn't say a blanket to say, oh, there was a hiring freeze across the bank and
Yeah.
no one was hired. I don't think that was the case. Like, I personally have not seen those kind of hard freezes, so there were people still being hired. There was jobs still to be done, right? The organization was still working. So it was quite contextual for every business or function or kind of region or country and things like that, right? So I think that's there. Um, Definitely, there are some countries which were more impacted than the others. I think the second wave in India was quite kind of yeah, it was quite a tough time for our colleagues in India as well. And so yeah, I mean, for example, for me, if in my team there were people sort of working from India, we were trying to see, okay, how best can we support them, and how best can we sort of help them in their work or whatever, if they needed time off and things like that, right? So I think that was the other thing. As an organization, we're trying to be as supportive as we could of the people who were impacted by pandemic. So but being fully sort of aware that it may sort of have impact on work, and holding space for colleagues for that, having empathy in these tough times for that. But yeah, other than that, I don't think there were any blanket freezes as such, at least within our organization. Yeah, I can speak for that.
Right. And yeah, very rightly said, it's very important to be compassionate towards your fellow employees as well during troubled times like these. Ma'am, just to wrap up this session, it's been a great session so far. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. But before wrapping up the session, I'd definitely like you to share some advice for those people who want to become HRs of the future and want to become HR professionals. So, what is that one message that you'd like to give them?
I think for me, and this is again probably a generic advice, but I I think it's important to know, like to take an informed decision, right? So to know what is it that you're sort of getting into, and not just like I know a lot of people who probably just take a career decision based on whatever XYZ reasons, but not like trying not having enough understanding about what is the content of the role, or what is the kind of what does HR as a function do, or what are the kind of jobs that I will be doing day in and day out. Because uh, if you do not take an informed decision, then it may be difficult for you to live that life like day in and day out, right? Your job becomes an important part of your life. You spend 8 to 8, whatever, 8+ hours, 8, 9, 10 hours like per day on that, right? So might as well just know what is it that you're getting into, know kind of what you will be required to do, what is, and be sure that that excites you, interests you, and also be flexible, to kind of say, okay, if things don't work out, it's fine. I mean, plans can change, my mind can change, I can change, my interests can change, right? So you never know what's going to happen. So yeah, I mean, obviously being flexible is also important. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing those wonderful words, ma'am. Now we're just going to leave the session open. I'm just going to see if we have any live questions from the audience. And if there are any, if you can just take a couple of them, and then we'll wrap the session up. All right?
Sure, sure.
And if there are any, if you can just take a couple of them, and then we'll wrap the session. Right, ma'am. So there is one question that says, what are some of the key things that I should include in my resume as a fresher if I'm applying to Standard Chartered Bank?
It's a very broad question, right? So So in Standard Chartered Bank, there are various roles, there are various departments, there are various businesses, right? So uh, if you're applying to a role in, say, sales versus, a role in, say, mid office, which is risk or something, or kind of, in technology or kind of IT kind of roles, right? It's all very different. So there is no one answer, but I think what may help, and it's maybe not to include in resume, but as interview prep, is to probably just kind of go to the site of Standard Chartered and read about the purpose, the values, and kind of what the organization stands for, and to kind of see if that really resonates with you as an individual. Try and understand what the culture of the kind of organization is like, and if you think you are a fit to that, and if you are a fit to that, then why do you think that's the case, right? I think trying to demonstrate some of that is important, and I think that will sort of help. But that's more on the behavioral side. On the technical side, of course, it depends on what role, etc., you apply for. But behaviorally, it's important to assess whether the organization's values and culture are a good match for you or not.
Right, absolutely. And I hope whoever asked this question has got your question answered. Thanks for your answer, ma'am. There is one more question which I'm just going to see here. Okay, there's one question that says, what are some of the technologies in HR today that are shaping the present of HR right now? Like, for example, someone has mentioned that nowadays resumes are being scanned automatically, through a software. So, are there any other technologies like this?
Yeah, there are lots actually, and kind of in every field, right. So if, and I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head. So for
Yeah.
example, learning and development, right? Learning and development departments used to be very different. There used to be trainers, there used to be sort of classroom training and coaching and all of that. But with the pandemic specifically, with everything moving virtual, you'll see now more and more kind
Yeah.
of learning and development programs becoming virtual, so that connects people across the globe. And B, with AI coming in, you will see somewhat like a Netflix kind of learning platform, right? Where you have a platform, and then you
Yeah.
start to take. You can choose whichever learning program you want to attend, and then you kind of select one, and then based on what your interests are, whatever the AI bot or whatever will kind of, the algorithm will suggest the right programs for you based on your interests or based on your kind of past experiences. So it's, think of it like a Netflix, right? So that concept is getting replicated somewhat in organizations, right? So that's one example. Obviously, the operational pieces, a lot of them are kind of getting automated. For example, the resume parser thing which you mentioned, right? That's true. That's kind of, some of it is happening. How much of it is being used, not used, which organizations? I'm not the best person to answer that, but yeah, that's the other one. And then there's this thing around gamification. So there used to be traditionally
Yeah.
like assessments which would happen, right? But now a lot of them are
Mhm.
getting gamified. So the organizations are kind of saying, okay, you come and you just take this game, and then based on that, we'll kind of find out, okay, what are your strengths and areas of development. So it's like technology is coming everywhere in all of the fields of HR, right? So it's very interesting as well. And also, I personally find it very exciting. So yeah, I mean, those are some that I can recall from the top of my head. But yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, ma'am. And very interesting that you mentioned about the gamification part, because we here at Unacademy itself have launched a product called Re-Level, which is all about, hosting a tournament sorts of in which people compete for a job opportunity. So it's quite interesting what you just mentioned. So with that, I think we'll close the questions for this live session, and we'll wrap this session up by ma'am saying thank you to you. Thank you so much for joining us on this platform. And we understand that it's quite late there in Singapore, but you took your time out and were with us and shared your valuable knowledge with our viewers. So thank you so much for joining us, ma'am.
Thanks, Rishabh. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Right, ma'am. All the
Thanks.
very
Have a great.
best. Yes, ma'am. All the very
Thanks.
best in your career going forward, ma'am.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye bye.